Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. Next month in Paris, France, the United Nations will host a climate change conference with the objective of achieving, for the first time in over 20 years of UN negotiations, a binding and universal agreement on climate change from all the nations of the world. At the country level, discussions have been taking place in countries large and small as part of an awareness program for the ordinary citizens to participate in what is described as a problem for all human, animal, and plant life on the planet. On Plain Talk this evening, to share their thoughts on this very complex topic are two persons who have demonstrated a keen interest and knowledge of the contested issue of climate change. They are career diplomat and Chilean ambassador to Guyana, Claudio Rojas Raquel, and Rear Admiral Gary Best, presidential advisor on the environment. Gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to come and sharing this hour and your knowledge with my guests.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Climate change is often perceived by the average person as a highly technical debate among scientists. How do you describe climate change in language that the ordinary person can understand, and for that person to realize how significant it is? Anyone can start, please.
Gary, can you start and then maybe can...
To put it simply, climate change essentially is about the warming of the Earth's temperature, the temperatures in the Earth. If you separate the science of the climate change, you look at the result of climate change, the result is essentially global warming. So what we feel, the heat we feel every day, the extensive heat we feel every day, that in essence is a clear manifestation of climate change. So that's, to put it simply, it's about the warming of the global temperature in the Earth.
If I can contribute to that very accurate circumstance related with climate change, probably I will bring about the concept of what you have made in your introduction remark, that this is a very complex phenomenon, because climate change takes part in a process of industrialization, and that related with the development of the degree of development of different countries. So it's something that is being produced man-made, and it has been the result of different industrial and production capacities of different countries. So it's a complex matter in terms that is related with policies that government try to promote and put in place for the development of their economies and their industry, but it has a sort of an impact. So that's why it's very important in terms of the point that you were making in the introduction, and also what Gary was mentioned, and that is something that we have to take into hands, because otherwise our world won't be able to sustain the pattern of development and industrialization that we're having nowadays.
Why is climate change considered, and one hears some real apocalyptic consequences of climate change? Why is climate change considered not only bad, but really dangerous for the very existence of societies and civilizations?
Well, Christopher, it's a slow onset of future disaster and current difficulties. I think when we look at climate change and the impact of climate change, to us living every day, we don't particularly recognize it. But when we reflect and we look to what has happened, then we see the danger of the climate. If the Earth continues to warm the way it's warming, then we could have some serious problems in our livelihoods, especially the poor and the remote poor. generally people who are better well off, the more rich, tend to survive. Most of the world's population, lie within a poverty belt that is significantly difficult for them to come out from. And if you have climate change, which results in climate refugees, results in restricted water supply, results in desertification, resulting in the warming of the Arctic. Even though new shipper lanes may open, the ice melting, food restriction, food shortages, we're talking about a possible catastrophe in the future. So that is why we have to look at it as not as a catastrophic event, but as an event, if we don't control, that could lead to catastrophe.
Before I bring the ambassador, you said slow onset. Is it accelerating?
Well, that's the science. And there's a lot of different views on the science. When I say slow onset, because as human beings, we adapt very, very quickly, and we adapt carefully. So we're adapting to the heat, to the global warming slowly. So we might have been adapting for the last 50 years without recognizing it. But the result and the consequence of that adaptation, right, is what I'm talking about. And we're talking about food shortages. If we can't feed ourselves, we're going to have serious problems. If desertification continues, we're going to have serious problems. So in terms of the science, I think from my perspective, I would say the science is pretty much on point. The science is accurate. There is global warming as a result of climate change. And I would say it's a slow onset. Is it accelerating? I don't think I'm competent to answer whether it's accelerating, but I would say it's a slow onset of a situation that could lead to catastrophic events if we don't try to arrest it in our time.
Ambassador?
Well, this is a fascinating discussion in terms that it's been taking for many years at the different levels, national, regional, and international level, and international community, about to come to terms in terms of what is climate change, and it really is something that we can tackle from the scientific side along with the political decision of the policymakers. And what is important to realize that in the context of the Rio Conference in 1992 onwards, the international community, including the scientific community, come to an agreement in terms that climate change is a phenomenon that is affecting everyone, and it's a phenomenon that the humankind have to take into board and try to do something about it. Otherwise, we are going to face, as Gary was mentioned, catastrophic circumstances. Therefore, I think that the question nowadays is not really if we agree or not of the phenomenon, because the science has proved that we have been suffering climate change. And it could be very severe, particularly to those small islands countries, that the rise of the high sea level water could make a displacement of entire countries, disappearance of entire countries and populations. If we are not able to retain the heat up of our planet, most probably we will have a situation that it will affect all humanity. There's some modeling forecasting that if we keep at the same path and we are not able to accomplish the reduction in terms of the aim reduction in terms of a temperature average in our world, we will face a circumstance that the rising of high level seas will be 2-3 meters in some coastal areas. And for some small countries like Palau, Seychelles, it could mean that the disappearance of a number of substantive space and areas. And it will be particularly affected the coastal areas, the coastal sea lines of many countries too.
Rear Admiral, if one were to put it within the Guyanese context, we know about the lots of the South Pacific Islands and the low-lying areas. What about Guyana and the fact that we are below sea level? What could be the impact on global warming and the melting of the ice way up north, perhaps? What impact it could have on us?
Well, the most likely impact in terms of the modeling is the sea level rise. And if the Atlantic Ocean rises in the context of our coastline, we're talking about shoreline loss. we're talking about population displacement, agricultural catastrophes, and at the moment, no alternative livelihood locations that have been established. So to get to the higher ground from the coastal plain, you're talking about getting up somewhere close to the Linden area. So it will be a major catastrophe for Guyana. So for us, we have to try to climate-proof our coastline. We have to find the right adaptation techniques and methods so we can climate-proof the coastline, stick with the mangrove planting, the mangrove, replanting the mangrove to hold the shoreline together, and not to look at the shoreline simply as a place only for enjoyment, but to recognize that what is growing there naturally is part of nature's protection of the shoreline. So I think if we look at it, it would be catastrophic for Guyana if we were to have even a 1 meter sea level rise. So therefore, we have to start looking to the future, start thinking about where do we live another 50 years from now? Where do we go? What is the 2050 plan for Guyana in terms of alternative livelihoods, alternative places? Where's the land use plan? How do we move the population slowly into different areas, or at least create these zones that we can move to if there is a catastrophe on the coastal plain? So I would say that we have to keep our eyes on it, and at the same time plan for the possibility of alternative living areas for people who live on the coastline.
Ambassador, what are some of the principal causes? And again, I'm asking you and putting you in a very difficult spot. How do you explain what are some of these causes in language that the ordinary viewer and persons like myself can understand?
Well, it could be very practical to some extent. Probably when we highly use, for instance, our fossil fuels, we are producing CO2 emissions.
Fossil fuel meaning gasoline and
all
diesel,
that, and also air cons producing CO2. Coal produce CO2. There are different sources of production of CO2. And accordingly to the industrialization model that took place over 120 years or plus, there was a pattern of consumption in terms of the shifting of the industry, and therefore that rapid growth of very large economies, it was sustained on extensive use, for instance, of coal or fossil fuel, and that created a sort of a house green effect, and then that created a sort of the heat, the produced heat in our countries or in our world. We should start to talk about our world. Really,
it's one word.
It goes really beyond the fact that it could affect Guyana or it could affect Chile. It's affecting the world. Create this sort of a buffer that really retains the heat, and therefore, in the retention of the heat, ice melting is taking place. The rise of seawater is taking place. Also, the problem of deforestation is something that we have to look at it too. The extensive sources of exploitations of forestry, it could have an impact too. So that's why at the international level we have created a sort of an equation that is a pro for quo in terms of creating mitigation aspect of it, adaptation aspect of it, and then compromising countries in order to reducing the emission of CO2. So it's a combination of many different factors. It's not just one single one. And it's, in that sense, it's very simple for the regular citizens of any country. If we want to contribute to reduce climate change or reduce emission of CO2, probably we should use less the car, or maybe which will be energy efficient and energy savers. We should be able to promote community-based work in terms to go and try to produce in scale new renewable energies resources.
That's like solar
or
hydro.
Wind power or whatever, or hydro. But even in a very simple manner, instead probably all of us living in a small or very complex city or larger city, we just enjoy to ride the car every single day by yourself, and you can be stuck in a traffic jam for hours. Meanwhile, you look into different cars related around the area, and they're just transporting one person, like you in your own car.
And
so
you have fumes leaving your car.
Yeah, so probably that also is a simple measure in terms to have efficient public transportation system to try to reduce the extensive use of cars, and so on and so forth. So there's different things that we can do.
Rear Admiral, Ambassador mentioned the forest. What's the significance? What does keeping the tree planted there do for us?
Well, what it does, the forest, because science has discovered that carbon, the forests store carbon. So when you cut the forest, you release carbon into the atmosphere. And by releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you contribute to global warming. So by keeping your forest intact, therefore you prevent the carbon from being released into the atmosphere. So that is the importance of our forests. So the extent to which we maintain our forests at a low deforestation rate, and a high rate of forestation, is good for us because it's good for the world. It's good if Congo, one of the largest rainforests existing in Congo, Indonesia, and Brazil, the Amazon, if they can maintain their forests at high rates of growth, it means they have carbon storage. And of course, is the Earth's, we tend to feel that those countries represent the Earth's lungs.
I was about to ask you that, if that's why they call the lungs of the
lungs
Earth.
of the Earth, we can breathe fresh air. So yes, the forests are important because it's carbon storage. The other thing too, we should at least let the public know that we need the greenhouse gases. We just don't need so much. We just don't need so much. We need to move, as the science is saying, back to 2-degree level, 1 to 2 degree target, which says there will be greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases allow the temperature of the Earth to be one reasonable for us to maintain ourselves in. What we don't need is the amount of greenhouse gases being emitted. And hence, climate change solutions is what we want to look at for on the road to Paris. What are the real climate change solutions? Where is it going? The industrialized world is pushing us into renewable energy. It is pushing us into alternative energy as solutions. So the whole framework under the previous convention is changing. So what we'll see coming out from Paris, in my opinion, is a financial model is different and a framework that is going to be slightly different. That's
so
what
both
I see
a
coming
technical as well as a financial.
Technical as well as a financial coming out, ought to come out from Paris. Funding ought to be released and moved to developing countries freer. But at the same time, I think we need to have mega blocks putting significant pressure on the major emitters. We need to look to the African Union, CELAC, CARICOM, all those global groupings to put pressure on the major emitters. And within the global groupings, there are major emitters. India, for example, is a major emitter. She's growing fast. China is a major emitter. Brazil is a big emitter. Russia is a big emitter.
US.
Well, US is already doing quite a lot to reduce its footprint. Significantly, US has done quite a lot to reduce its footprint, but it has a long way to go. Recently, China has announced a major move to reduce its carbon and to be a major player in the carbon market. But I'm sure Ambassador would agree with me. Part of the solution and part of the problem is that the major world sees this as an opportunity for business, an opportunity for a carbon market and to manage a carbon market. If only the top 5 control the carbon market, I think we're going to have some serious problems in finding solutions for developing countries or lesser developed countries such as Guyana, more particularly the small islands.
Ambassador, there has been talk about whether human activity is in fact, and certainly 1992 there was still some doubt as to whether it was really human activities that were responsible for such things as volcano eruptions, changes in the sun's intensity, that some things were in fact natural, that climate change was natural. Is that still the conventional wisdom, or is it that, look, we human beings are the ones that are responsible?
Well, if you take into account and consideration what has been discussed in the framework of the process of the climate change conventions and at the international level, there's a clear indication that human activity has a sort of an implication. I wouldn't say that in volcano eruptions or
because they've been going on for centuries.
But probably what we have to look when we're talking about climate change is that the concept and the work done by the international community in terms to address the issue of adaptation is part of that reflection that countries and indeed human beings so in those countries have to really perform a series of measures that could be in a manner sustainable and adapting their production capacity. And it's important what Gray was mentioned in terms of the announcement of different countries about their reducing their voluntary reduction of CO2. India has just mentioned today
Yes.
A very significant contribution. And then there is that tension, among those big countries that are coming into the globalization process, like Brazil, India, China, that their process of industrialization is being delayed in comparison with other countries that they have done it in an early stage.
Yes.
And it was not really a sort of a matter of consideration back then to carry on this development in the way that they did it, because there was no a sort of a sense of what the impact was creating. No? So that's a very significant principle that is common but differentiate responsibility, CBDR. And I think that also that principle, the CBDR principle, attain very much so to what you are asking in terms if climate change has a sort of equation related with humans, and I think that there is.
And I agree with Ambassador. It is human driven. We say it is anthropogenic because what the science is saying, it's the activities of human beings that has created the problems with climate change, that has accelerated global warming. But the Earth has always had its own natural disasters. Take forest fires, for example. It was a major forest fire. The forest regenerates itself even better. The seeds are created from that fire. It's nature. Nature will correct itself. But what man has done, and as Ambassador said, in our quest to develop the post-industrial area, creating machineries, development, using technology, burning fossil fuels to drive production. It is the activity of man in that sense that has caused the climate to be so imbalanced that we have to now arrest it and return to a level that is considered to be not neutral but sufficient enough for us to be able to live comfortable and create and maintain the world for generations to come. So we have a unique opportunity and an important responsibility to ensure that what we do is intergenerational, intragenerational, and we leave a better world than the one we inhabited, the one we inherited rather.
Yes, the world we devolve to those who come after us should be better than the one we've inherited.
Because what we call in the world space now the Anthropocene. It's a new term, Anthropocene, meaning that this is where we live as human beings and this is our space. And what happens in Guyana has an impact in the United States. As the ambassador says, one climate, the impact, it doesn't matter, but the impact is there. So it's difficult to compartmentalize difficulties. Take, for example, and you know this very well, if you look at the entrance to UG, at the top of the main highway,
yes,
not the embankment, and there's some hire cars that are working there now, taxis. You look at the area, there's no grass.
That's right. Yeah.
There's no weed, witnessing erosion, it's going to disappear. Imagine that on a large scale.
Yeah.
It will create a desert where people can't farm and plant any longer. So it's the activities of the human being that indeed have caused this great problem. Not individually, but by our actions. So we're in a position to correct it. Germany, for example, is way ahead in terms of alternative energy as a climate change solution. Japan, to some extent, they've gone to alternative energy solutions. They've been preparing a long time. So they're way ahead. Some small countries like Costa Rica incidentally has a good track record. Barbados has the highest per capita solar installation in the world.
Yeah.
So countries are moving apace.
In the
and
world?
moving ahead. In the world, highest per capita.
Yeah.
It's a strange phenomenon.
Every house almost has a solar panel
and they move
on
it,
the
and,
roof,
not,
yes.
and it's not water heating, it's solar voltaic, right?
Yeah.
It's actually producing power. So there is the technology. This cost, the initial cost is high.
But falling. It's high but falling.
But falling. But again, we have politics in always involved at the international level, and we have economics and we have finance. And therefore, the carbon market, I saw something today on the carbon market that it's not necessarily meant to be an outcome of Paris, but this whole discussion about the carbon market is coming back out again. The carbon market, the ETS, the European trade system, is really not as successful as they thought it would be. We were talking about a forest carbon market because we are a forested country, looking to see if there'll be a forest carbon market. Again, if that comes out of Paris, that would be good for Guyana to be part of the forest carbon market. But again, with the large players and the shares that they bring in, they can dominate the market. You can be a small player, not a big player.
And we know how markets can be manipulated.
And can be very volatile too.
Yeah, despite, you mentioned the United States of America as having made some progress, and I believe, I don't believe I'm being unkind to the Republicans by saying that was almost an initiative of the Democratic Party under Barack Obama. You still have climate skeptics. I mean, Donald Trump, you have Sarah Palin was a major one. The Republican Party generally in the U.S. So you still have a serious problem convincing persons who you would think would know. Isn't that right, Ambassador?
Well, I wouldn't say I wouldn't tempt myself to try to understand American politics. So it's something that goes beyond my capacity in terms of what we are here tonight. But I think that probably one thing that we learn from what is been the discussion of the issue in USA is that all societies, including Chile, Guyana, everyone, is really very aware of this the significance of this discussion. So that create a critical mass in terms of the civil society that push the agenda forward, and therefore it's of essence that different governments have to channel public policy that they are sound and sustainable, in terms that sound and sustainable, related also with the confrontation of having climate change as a phenomenon that present in our daily life. I think that what is something that is very sensitive also, and is related with what Gary was mentioned, that the development of renewable energy is being exponential nowadays, and probably the challenge therefore is for governments to be able to change the component of the matrix, the energy matrix, and probably to put incentives forward there to support the development of renewable energy, so they can bring, as you are probably rightly said, in terms of the price-wise, it's very high nowadays to introduce renewable energy. So, but if you, in your matrix, in your energy matrix, make a commitment to say at least 20% by X year,
yes,
we will reach, that it will come to the grid coming from renewable energy, then you're making sense. You're making a sort of a good public policy. And probably if we step back a little bit and we see how this evolution in terms of the support that it had this issue of climate change in the developed world, including the United States, is because there is a sense that we need to do something together. Probably here is no the typical blame and shame anymore, because if we conduct in that manner, we won't be able to really to progress on what is really substantive for the world. So that's the uniqueness that we are facing in the process of COP21 to Paris, that in different settings and in different groupings, you see how the international community is working in an approach that we say out of the box. Before we were, in the blame and shame kind of mood. Now we are not any longer. Before we were in the block of the North against the South. That's not anymore. It's something that we have to bring about the hands of everyone together in order to produce a concrete result and progress towards the COP21 in Paris.
Admiral, I think the world, and certainly this part of the world, started to take serious note of climate change when the Rio conference, and you remember that boat that docked in Guyana. How would you assess the progress that the world has made since Rio 1992?
That's like it's a big question, Chris. But I would say that I would say the progress since 1992. I think the progress has been moderate and not exceptional. Moderate, and I speak from the perspective of a resident of a developing country. We expected and thought that more would have been done, more financing would have flowed to the developing countries, more technology would have been transferred, and these are deliverables within the convention. And for certain, the financing
and that are available.
The financing has been a problem. Now there's been a global financial crisis from the onset of 2007. Appeared in 2007, but started before. But I don't think there was a serious commitment by the developed countries to provide the financing. I don't think there was a serious commitment. The second thing I recognize also for my own research is that it is quite expensive to remodeling a factory, for example, to climate proof it. And I think when you look at an economy as large as the United States or China or even Chilean economy, and they have to pass a new act, let us say a new building code in Chile, or a new code for emissions reduction, it may cost millions of dollars for a particular firm or company to have to make that change. So and if that change is required to save the Earth's planet, who's going to fund it?
Who's going to pay for it?
When Chile or Guyana may not have been singularly responsible. And I think that's where the politics we saw the politics. So I think the developed world could have done much more to advance where we are now in terms of climate change solutions. But perhaps, as Ambassador said, it is now being recognized that we may truly have a global compact and not different compacts as we had in 1992. You will recall also the U.S. did not sign on after.
That's correct.
After
that's
92 because many senators may have lost their seats if they went to elections to bring a multi-million-dollar bill to your county, to your state, knowing fully well the challenge and the cost. So I would say it's been moderate. The progress has been moderate. And if you know CARICOM countries, we haven't been able to receive the kind of financing for adaptation purposes as we thought we would have received.
But I want to address an issue you raised, the cost. Now, it's one thing to focus on the cost, but what about the consequences? Take the U.S. It says, we can't make this factory climate friendly, but then you face Katrina. So, what's the decision that really politicians are facing? Is it an investment now or an investment in the future?
Yeah. If I may interact with it, I think that there's a clear guideline here related with all the issues that we're discussing. There's the domestic capacity dimension. You have to have a domestic capacity in order to address these issues. And for that to take place, you have to have finance. You have to have resources. You have to invest in resources. And then comes the tension. So how we do invest around? Do we go and knock on the door to the donor community in terms of ODA and to ask them to fulfill their commitment related with ODA? Or we go into the framework of the convention itself that have different mechanisms for financing and then to exercise those mechanisms that have been laid out there, and there was a consensus and agreement to have them in place, then probably it's rightly said that nowadays is the time for asking to those commitments to really fulfill. We won't move anyway further if we don't have our own domestic capacity, if we don't have a reaction of national interest, because what it is at the end of the world, any government will try to promote economic development, social well-being of their population, and react to disasters like Katrina in a manner that is consistent with the major interests of that people that is being affected. So it's a complex matter. We have realized that through 1.5 years of negotiations since COP Lima last year, there's been step forward and step backwards. We have instructed the facilitator of this process, Algeria and United States, to work out a common draft that will put everything together, but in a coherent and cohesive manner that could make sense at the end. We will be successful in Paris. We will have a very solid document that we can enforce and look forward for the future. Well, if you take the conference of Rio in 2012, there was a sort of international commitment to change the state of the play. It's not any longer the same, no more. So therefore, is something that probably it will be very difficult if you move into the area of binding principles or binding resolutions. But maybe if you work in out of the box again, in a different scenario, or making voluntary commitment, and then you be obliged to retain those voluntary commitments because no one came to tell you what to do or not what to do. Mm-hmm. But at least in the grounds of voluntary concrete commitment, then you are moving forward. We just have had a very significant meeting in Chile the last 3 days about a conference that is called Our Oceans. And it's also related with climate change and the well-being, for, in a manner to say, of the activities related with the oceans and the coastal areas. So different actors in a different scale, we are playing and we are contributing in a different manner to this. So if we are merging, and creating this international movement of commitments, probably will have something that could be of substantive improvement of what we have today. We are aiming, and of course it will be ideal to have a sort of a binding principle, but we have to look to work with reality.
And Chris, the ambassador mentioned the oceans. The oceans is a great storage of carbon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The ocean stores a lot of carbon, just like the forest. So we have to protect our oceans too.
We're already witnessing the destruction and extinction of several species of animal and plant lives. We're actually witnessing the loss of human lives across continents. You've mentioned the oceans. We hear of reefs dying. Now, is it too late? Well, we hear of animals becoming extinct, so many species of birds, and so. Is it too late?
I don't think so at all. I don't think it's too late. I think like I said earlier, man, we're very adaptable. The human, we're a surviving species. I don't think it's too late. I think we have enough time to correct, and we've started to correct. And I think we have the right formula: emissions reduction, keep reducing emissions. But technology will play an important role because, for example, the issue is not fossil fuel burning. The issue is not burning coal or burning bunker fuel. The issue is the carbon dioxide that's released when you burn it. That's the issue. So if you find technology that could reduce, and if you can decarbonize the coal before when you fire it, when you burn it, you can decarbonize and trap it. If you can capture the carbon at the same time and secure it, then you could continue to use coal or continue to use bunker C. I think it will go into technology. So we should we should see coming out of COP21 a significant commitment to provide more money into research, which is carbon capture research. And I know we have the brains, I think we have the money, but it's not coming forward. It's not coming forward. The Green Climate Fund, for example, should have been capitalized to $100 billion. I think you're aware that has not been done. I think it has about $5 billion.
Yes.
Hopefully there will be some serious, not only commitments, but serious deposits into the Green Climate Fund. So here again, we're talking about a lot of money. If you look to the UNFCCC Secretary General herself, this Secretary of UNFCCC, her name slips me right now. She's saying we need over $1 trillion to solve this problem. It's no longer billions; it's now over $1 trillion to deal with the whole issue of climate change. So it's really require a lot of funding, and we have to bring in the private sector, the public sector, the government sector. It just can't be run by just internationals any longer. I saw today, I think 5 of the top banks issued a release that they are interested in the global carbon market. These are the big banks.
Yes.
Banks want to make money. That's what banks do. They make money. So it is not too late, Chris. It is not too late at all. I think we have all the ingredients to continue to correct this issue, correct this malady of a warming globe. I think we have maybe what we lack is the will and the commitment to put the resources behind it.
And Ambassador, you mentioned about the where it started, because we tend to use the Industrial Revolution as that mark and talk about reducing and increasing no more than so much from that date. Now, the vast majority of the world economies rely on energy sources or manufacturing techniques that do release greenhouse gases at almost every stage of production, distribution, transportation, storage. Is a green economy consistent with growth and development? And is that the challenge that we really face?
Well, Chris, I'm a dreamer, so I believe on that. Of course, that is possible. We have experience that have been proved right. I mean, green economy is not just a slogan. If you decide that yourself you're going to be moving to a green economy, you have made your commitment to certain standard to reach the level of green economy. So if any country decides to declare itself to be a green economy, they have to compliance with a series of standards that are consistent with coming around with the green economy. You have to reduce CO2 emission, you have to reforest, you have to do sustainable exploitation of natural resources, and you have to avoid extracting industry. So it tends to be very complex. And remember that we like officials, or we like public servants, we are interested to bring about the well-being of our people. But it was mentioned, right, that there is different instruments that are raising there, and new players that are interesting to come on board and to try to do something for the good of the world. Probably we should go into very important experience that we have had in the United Nations context, that is, for instance, Global Compact. Mm-hmm. You know, if we are able to develop, and I rescue your idea to develop the concept of Global Compact of social responsibilities in terms of major companies, major private sector companies, to agree on a set of principles in terms of how to develop their manufacturing or their production capacity in a friendly environmental manner, we could have a tremendous impact. And again, this is not a confrontation and a tension between making profit or not making profit. I think that it will be very profitable if we are able to produce in a more cleaner manner. and we will make a substantive contribution for our world, and we will make a substantive contribution for our shareholders and for the well-being of our people. So I think that this is the right moment to invest wisely.
Admiral, let's take Guyana context and
the green economy.
a
Yes.
green economy as we try to achieve some level of development, because we're still pretty poor.
That's right. But we challenge. Let's look at it. I think perhaps we're the best stage to introduce the green economy. The President has made it very clear that the development pathway is by way of a green economy. He's listed Bartica to be the model tongue for green economy. So, Chris, most of the goods we import from overseas, out of the country, those goods are landing in Guyana already with carbon embedded in them. Goods from China, for example, are coming with carbon embedded because China is a major emitter. So that's where it could get complex. So if we are a net importer of goods, and the countries from which we import are large emitters, then we're importing goods with a significant footprint of carbon in it.
Yes.
So that's a challenge in moving towards the green economy. But it is doable, because if you look at the way our tongues are located, if you look at the grid system we have, it's easy to install solar farms, reduce our energy by half immediately if we move into solar farms. But green economy goes beyond low carbon in my view. Green economy is but low emissions. So we can deal with any energy efficiency. That's something we can manage. The finance is available now to move to alternative energies, different types of alternative energies. We had some difficulty with the previous model on the Admiral Falls that had serious issues with that. But we have multiple opportunities for hydro in Guyana. But in terms of greening the economy, greening every aspect of the economy, we have to look at all the various sectors we have. The natural resource sector, the poverty alleviation sector. We have to redefine our sectors. Those traditional sectors cannot hold now. They're sectors that require to be redefined to meet the people. We have to educate our people. We have to understand that if you're greening the economy, you have to climate-proof everything that you're doing. We have to look at our building codes. Should we really have a plot of land that is almost rectangular, or should it be triangular, so that the house faces the sun with a better angle, and we trap most of the northeast trade winds, so we have natural light coming into the home. So we need to look at our road network. If we have good roads, then we can ask people to ride a bicycle and not drive a car. We have good roads. We can
A transportation system.
Exact transportation system. We can have electrical cars moving across the cities. We can introduce roundabouts. So greening the economy really is stepping back and having a comprehensive look at how we are doing business, and do it in a different manner where we climate proof and we protect everything we do from the vagaries of climate change. That's what the green economy is all about. And at the end of the day, it gives us what the president called a good life. That's what we'll get at the end of the day.
The operator signaling that at the time we have, and this is really a very fascinating discussion, and I hope, gentlemen, I can invite you again, perhaps after the Paris conference. In your view, is there the political will among the larger countries and larger groupings of countries to make the target of no more than 2% above the pre-industrial levels? Is that achievable?
If you ask,
in November.
If you ask me in terms of the commitment and the time that we have deserved to this discussion, again, I'm a dreamer, no? So I am optimistic. I think that it could be achievable if we find the political will of different key players in the international community. And I think that we are moving a step forward in that direction. But you invite us after Paris, so let's talk after that then.
My answer, it is doable, yes. The INDCs now, I think if you do the arithmetic calculation, it doesn't look as though you get the 2-degree target based on what the INDCs, but more are still coming in.
Yeah.
We not yet have all the
we
INDCs
are not yet there.
in. So when they all get in and they do the calculation, maybe it will demonstrate we can get the 2-degree target. But remember, it's still indicative. It's not a commitment. If we convert the indicative
into a commitment,
into commitment at Paris, and the indicative now or then comes up, gives you the 2-degree target, and then it becomes a commitment, then I would say yes, we can do it.
the commitment within the United Nations framework, climate change conference framework, all well and good. You go, you make these big commitments, you come back and you find your blocks of industrialists, your manufacturers association, and your trade group said, look, we can't do that. How does the United Nations, perhaps, which we know is not the most powerful enforcer in the world, how does it enforce any binding commitment that is made in Paris?
Probably I will change the focus, and I will rescue the sense of domestic capacity and national responsibility. I think that, at least in the case of Chile, we have taken, just 2 days ago, President Bachelet has announced a commitment of reducing carbon emission. It's a voluntary commitment, but it's in the context of the Paris conference, and we set up a date for the time that we will achieve it in a realistic manner. So we are doing a sort of a forecast approach in terms that we will try to aim in 2030 certain contribution in terms of what? Of the PIB and the consumption patterns. So there is an equation that combines different elements and set up a commitment. So that sort of approach is only possible if countries at the national level take the right decision in the right moment. And we don't have a recipe to do it. We are not saying that this is what other countries should be doing. But what I want to overemphasize is the national dimension responsibility on doing so, even though, as you said, United Nations, it doesn't have a binding principle by itself, but it's the best fora that we have to agree on something that we can move forward in a manner that is sustainable and it responds to the challenge that we have. And we was mentioned here in this, tonight in terms of living a better world for the future generations.
Enforceability, Rear Admiral.
It's always difficult to enforce international law. I mean, as students, it's always difficult to enforce. It's a lot of you need national, domestic pressure on your own governments to make them responsible. We need to ensure that the Greenpeace of the world,
civil
the
society,
international organizations, the NGOs remain active to put international pressure on governments to really be responsible.
Be accountable.
So it cannot be done only by themselves. It's like we say, you can't try the devil's case in hell. We're going to need those external entities. We're going to need the NGOs, because enforcing international law is not easy. We know President Bush had a company, the Coalition of the Willing, at one time to fight a dirty war. So it's difficult to enforce international law, but we believe it can be done.
I think I have a chance to ask one final question, a short question. Is there sufficient work being done in regional groups, like, for example, in the South American group and in the CARICOM group, to push this line in Paris?
I would say, and probably Gray will know better from the Caribbean perspective, but I would say that we have to acknowledge that in Lima, Peru has made a major effort, and Latin America support the effort done by Peru in COP20. And it was a successful conference, and it was a step forward in the process of moving to COP21. We are from a very diverse region. You have different kind of natural characteristics in different countries, We have largest operation of forestry. We have extreme dry deserts, and meanwhile you have the Amazon basin that conveys 6 nations of South America into it. And then you have Costa Rica, you mentioned. Costa Rica has had a very progressive position related with rainforests. So you have the smaller island states of the Caribbean that they're concerned about the rising sea level.
Yes.
So you have a sort of a melting pot of different interests. And of course, we have to respond to a sort of a common approach, and in terms of common approach of commitments of mutual support of different needs of different countries. I think that we have made contribution and positive ones.
CARICOM, you want to?
What CARICOM has done is to maintain some common positions as it moved toward COP20 and COP21. And one of the things that keep CARICOM together is that they fall under the banner of small island development states, they fall under the banner of vulnerable states, and they fall under the banner of states that are vulnerable with very poor resistance. So within the AOSIS group, within the small island development states group, they're treated as a special grouping. So the lead negotiators for each of the CARICOM countries, they meet often, and they establish some common positions. So I think CARICOM has indeed had a fairly common position on the way to Lima 20, and they have a fairly common position on the way to COP21.
Ambassador Claudio, Rojas, Raquel, and Rear Admiral Gary Best, let me say what a pleasure and what fascinating discussion we've had this evening, as you've already accepted my invitation to come back after the conference in Paris. It really has been very stimulating, and I hope, viewers, that you found this evening's discussion to your liking and indeed to your benefit. It's clearly an indication that we've all we need lifestyle changes, both personally and nationally. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to the operators, and good night, viewers. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well done.